Welcome to today's VEROSCOPE investigation, where we're going to be looking at Lieutenant Detective Sergeant Lank, who was the lead investigator for a short time, along with Bad Sergeant Good, who is no longer with the Canton Police, strangely enough, and by pure coincidence. I believe he was released, or whatever the term is, a few days after the VEROSCOPE report on Bad Sergeant Good, it was called, if you want to go and check out that VEROSCOPE report. But each day we do forensic linguistics, and we choose a case or a witness statement or the transcript of a trial. And today we're going to be looking at Lieutenant Lank, who we're going to be watching actually answer to Alan Jackson in Karen Reid's trial. So without further ado, let's play a little bit of the trial, and then we'll go back to the forensic linguistic analysis, where we go into detail and find where the patterns are that perhaps Lieutenant Lank is being deceptive. Okay, let's get on with the trial.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Your Honor. May we approach briefly?
Sure.
And thank you to the trial channel for their wonderful editing, as always.
All right, jurors, so you're about to hear evidence of an event that happened in 2002. This evidence can be considered by you insofar as it demonstrates or relates to the credibility of this witness and the thoroughness of the investigation into this case for which the defendant is currently on trial before you folks. You may use this evidence to the extent that you find it credible in deciding whether there was any bias or favoritism on the part of the police in their investigation in this case.
May I?
Mr. Jackson, yes.
Lieutenant Lank, I want to start by asking you about your relationship with certain members of the Albert family. Do you know any other members of the Albert family other than Brian Albert?
Yes.
Can you describe who those are?
Kevin Albert, who is a detective on our department, Chris Albert, and I know Tim Albert.
Are those three individuals brothers?
Okay, so in forensic linguistics and statement analysis, we look for deception markers and we put in a flag. As everyone knows by now, individual flags mean nothing by themselves. However, clusters of flags and superclusters of flags can start to tell a story. In this case, we are going to notice avoidance as a pattern. Let me paint a little bit of the picture so that we can start seeing the patterns more quickly than if we knew nothing about the case, which, by the way, is how we, once we have a level of training on forensic linguistics, ideally on a case you should know as little as possible when you do your first pass of analysis, so that you literally aren't being self-influenced through self-bias, having formed an opinion. And then look for information which confirms that, which is obviously a huge danger of any exercise of analysis. So, to paint the picture, and why Cannone was telling the jury this is evidence from 20 years ago, before John O'Keefe was found in the snow, 20 years before John O'Keefe died outside Brian Albert's house, in effect. Michael Lank, here he is, got into a physical fight, off duty, intoxicated, and to protect an Albert brother. He's going to be very sensitive to how well he knows these brothers, because one of the brothers had a killed Boston cop lying in the snow outside his house where the party was, where John O'Keefe was dropped off to at the party, where others had invited him back to the party. And because he knows the Alberts, and because he's helped an Albert in the past, drunk, physically involved in the fight, the handcuffing, the sending everyone home without charges, no police report, swept under the carpet because they're childhood friends, they've all grown up together. And then he has to tell the jury and you that no, I don't really know them that well. And that's the linguistics which we're going to see, which sounds strange. And so you'll get a gut feel that he's being deceptive, but we're going to analyze why. So we're going to connect the language to your gut feel. And the advantage to you as you watch these VEROSCOPE videos, by learning to connect your gut feeling to the language, your ability to detect deception when someone's trying to deceive you or gaslight you increases significantly. And there are enormous benefits to knowing if you're being deceived, from business to life to relationships. You can imagine how important it is as a part of your armory, if you like. So, without further ado, let's carry on.
Yes,
Who is the eldest brother?
Brian.
How long have you known, I want to start first with Tim Albert. How long have you known Tim Albert?
I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid because he was friends with a younger brother of a friend of mine.
Starting at what age?
12.
So you've known
He was 12. I was probably 16 or so.
Okay, so the better part of your life, you've known Tim Albert.
Since about 16, I would say.
And what about Chris Albert?
Chris Albert I've known since junior high.
Which would be about what age?
13, 14,
You grew up
12,
with Chris?
12, 13. I was friendly with Chris from junior high through high school and into our 20s.
And friendly with Tim?
I wouldn't say I was friendly to say hello to Tim. I didn't associate with him. He was younger. He was Chris's younger brother.
But you also knew Chris's older brother, Brian?
Yes.
Back in those days.
I knew who he was.
So you've known the three of them for basically your entire life?
No, I had met them. I had met Brian. I didn't know him other than just being Chris's older brother when we were younger kids.
Certainly with regard to Chris, you would consider him a close friend.
I love the nose scratch right at the delivery of the deception. It's classic. And the color of his skin.
Consider who a close friend?
Chris. I'm
Yes.
using first names only because they're all named
Sure.
Albert.
Sure.
Under the cognitive stress, which came out physically, he then demonstrated a classic deceptive marker, which is question the question. Or sometimes, for similar reasons, they might say, excuse me, or sorry, or pardon me, pretending they didn't quite hear. Questioning the question or pretending you didn't hear is one way of buying extra cognitive time and relieving some of the pressure of deception. We do not like to deceive, unless you're in that 10% of psychopaths who have no problem with it. You know, the vast majority of people generally are good people and they don't like to deceive, and it's an unusual thing for them to do. So they struggle with it and they demonstrate the patterns which we learn. Isn't it interesting how the fact that we're truthful beings is what changes our language and behavior in deception? And also because it's coming from an area of the brain called the broca, which is where language is produced at the unconscious level. So the language choice, and the person knows everything that they know, and the choice of the language gives away what they know and how they're being deceptive. It will often mirror back to the truth. The problem that someone who is lying has is they have to manage the truth because they know what they know. They then have to manage the lie and present it to you. And they have to manage your reaction to the lie and monitor it and real time potentially alter their behavior or increase hedging or decrease hedging depending on how much buy-in you're doing. This is almost 3 times the normal cognitive load. And so any extra stress through a question from you, perhaps, or in this case, Alan Jackson, it can cause freeze, not freed. Karen Reed is freed, but it can cause freeze. And this can manifest itself in cognitive overload and the classic stutter, the classic pattern of I, as an example. Doesn't necessarily mean what follows is deception. The person might genuinely be choosing their words or comparing examples. But a lot of the time, whatever follows that sort of pattern with the cognitive overload of classically I, and then whatever they're going to say, it involves some form of self-censorship as they're choosing. And it's all happening so rapidly inside their head that most of it is actually unconscious as they compare their choices of what they should say in the deception. So without further ado, let's carry on.
Chris and I were pretty good friends when we were younger, yes.
I want to draw your attention to an incident in August of 2002. Do you remember an incident in 2002 occurring with that involved Chris Albert?
Yes.
In 2002, in August of 2002 specifically, you were off duty, correct?
Yes.
You had been drinking alcohol, correct?
Yes.
You were approached by Chris Albert out in a parking lot, is that right?
That's correct.
And Chris Albert told you some information about being in a fight, that he had been in a fight or an altercation of some sort, correct?
He told me he had been in an altercation earlier in the night and some threats had been made to him and his family.
And you got out of your car and discussed this with Mr. Albert, correct?
No.
You just talked to him while you were seated in your car?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did some other individuals approach that same area?
Yes.
Was there a fight that you believed was about to ensue?
Are they all drunk all the time or drink driving in Canton? It seems as if even the law enforcement officials do so. He's been drinking. He's now sitting in the car, about to have a fight with people.
Yes.
Did you get out of your car at that point?
I did.
Did you come to Chris's aid by, quote unquote, activating yourself as an officer?
I got out of my car and I approached the group and I pleaded with them to not fight tonight. I said, there's not going to be a fight tonight. There's 6 of you guys. He's here with his girlfriend. There's not going to be a fight tonight.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Look, if you're drunk and you're in your car and you see your pal in trouble and there's 6 of them, you've got to even things up, haven't you? You know, you've got to perhaps put your law enforcement hat on and say, right, guys, game's over, go home, etc. Or possibly the need to escalate if necessary, which I believe he then does. And they're rolling on the floor. Looks like from as we hear the testimony, Lank gets into the mount position, has to be dragged off the guy. Anyway, let's carry on.
Did you come to Chris Albert's aid as best you could as a longtime friend of his?
I came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and of need.
That citizen happened to be Chris Albert, whom you had known since you were 12 years old.
Correct.
Ultimately, a fight did break out, did it not?
Yes.
And you engaged in that fight.
Yes.
And again, you had been drinking alcohol at that point, correct?
Correct.
And you were off duty in August of 2002 during this fight.
Yes.
Just like
This is bad lieutenant, isn't it? It's the night. He's drunk in his car. What's he got? A hip flask? He gets out and has a fight. Unbelievable.
you were off duty in 2022 when you were called by Sergeant Good to activate and come to the crime scene at 34 Fairview.
When Sergeant Good contacted me, I was not working. I was due to work at 7:45 that morning. When Sergeant Good contacted me and told me what was going on, then I activated myself and came to work because I was the...
Look at the history. There's bad Sergeant Good, who, by the way, we've got a VEROSCOPE report on. As I said, do go and check that out. The history here. They've all grown up together. They've all been cops together. They all know each other really well. There's a dead cop on the front lawn of the party. And they shut down the murder scene. They refuse to investigate the party. They close ranks. Now, what's upsetting is that John is a fellow law enforcement officer. He's a Boston cop. And rather than the thin blue line, as we call it here in the UK, closing ranks for their fallen officer and investigating what the hell went on in that party, regardless of who the homeowners are, there's a dead cop on the lawn. He's our number one priority. You cannot let the killing of a Boston cop be handled in such a ridiculous Keystone Cop manner. Now, to be fair to Lank, he apparently was newly promoted to being a detective. So to some degree, it's the middle of the night. He's probably got a year's experience, doesn't really know what he's doing, perhaps, hasn't never investigated a murder scene, and he's sort of stuck because these are his mates. But he had to make a decision. And I think from the linguistics, he's not necessarily a bad man, but the circumstances led to a bad decision. And I think it's more a case of looking the other way and hoping, rather than deliberately framing an innocent woman. That's the role that others took, who have more direct knowledge and can't look away, in my opinion, as you know, and as the evidence from the linguistics shows. Let's carry on.
Detective Sergeant.
And that's similar sort of activation, using that word in air quotes, a similar sort of activation that you employed back in 2002 to assist Chris Albert.
No.
You did, in fact, call for someone to call the police and get some Canton officers over there, correct?
Excuse me, so in 2002?
In 2002.
Yes.
Okay, and I failed to ask you this, but in 2002, you were, in fact, a Canton Police officer.
Yes.
At the time. After the other officers arrived, did you order the other officers to handcuff or somehow restrain one of the two brothers that were involved in this fight with Chris?
No.
Ultimately, did you see whether or not those officers handcuffed or otherwise restrained one of the brothers that was involved in this fight?
Yes.
And did you then engage physically in a fight with the...
Okay, so we've got a drunken cop turns up, chats to his mate. His mates cause some trouble, and there's 6 blokes want to fight. It's 6 against 1 or 6 against 2 if Lank steps out. Lank does the right thing, steps out. Doesn't matter that he's drunk or off duty. He puts his policeman's hat on, tries to defuse it. The 6 guys, also probably drunk, don't accept. And plus they've got the 6-2 odds, and they're drunk. Oh dear, looks like a weapon's going to have to be pulled out to even things up a little bit. But instead he calls for backup, and backup arrives. He's still wearing his policeman's hat. Once the odds are more in his favour, perhaps 6 against 4, he joins in, starts doing his wrestling and jiu-jitsu on the ground. Eventually gets on top of the guy, no doubt giving him a few pelts, and gets dragged off. The guy gets handcuffed, etc. The whole thing then gets swept under the carpet. Let's see what happens.
Other brother who was not restrained?
No. The struggle had already occurred.
All right. So let me make sure I get the timing right. You did, in fact, engage in a physical fight with one of the brothers, correct?
Upon being struck, yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Upon being struck, yes.
And then you struck him back.
Yes.
You ended up on the ground.
Yes, we were wrestling, yes.
And ultimately the other officers had to pull you off that man, correct?
No.
You ultimately, the fight was broken up between you and the other brother. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And that fight was broken.
So little things like reliable denials, no, as singular words, is good coaching for being on the witness stand. If you don't, or never reveal anything you don't have to. Singular answers are perfect if you're coaching someone to be deceptive. But in terms of a denial, it's completely unreliable. No, it's no. I did not. There's nothing in it. There's no reliability at all. So notice what he did. It was the singular no. No, they did not drag me off him. It's far more reliable.
Up by the officers who were on scene.
Yes.
All right. After this physical altercation with the brother who was not ultimately restrained.
The judge is getting nervous. She always gets nervous when the truth is coming out. She starts swinging her arms. I've even seen her, to protect a witness, crawl over her desk here, lean into the witness box and start grabbing evidence off them, photographs. Very often she'll swing her arms and knock her microphone in excitement. And she does this when she's nervous, when the truth is being drawn out. And she'll often say, "That's enough of that, Mr. Jackson," or "last question," or "move along," or she'll interrupt in some way, giving the witness a break, or she'll call a sidebar. She's basically strategically intervening.
Both of the brothers and everybody else was just told by the officers, just go away, get out of here, go home, correct?
No, I believe one of the brothers left the scene, fled the scene, and the brother that was restrained was ultimately uncuffed and left free to go.
And nobody was arrested that night?
Correct.
Nobody chased down the brother that left the scene, correct?
That's correct.
And nobody arrested the brother that had been handcuffed?
Correct.
And no police reports were written by you or any of the other officers about this incident on that night?
I don't recall when the other officers wrote theirs. I did not write mine on that night.
The next day, you became aware that one or both of the brothers had arrived at Canton Police Department to file a formal complaint for having been physically attacked by you and some of the other officers involved, correct?
I don't recall when I was made aware that they had come down to the police station.
You are...
Okay, this is practiced and coached and deceptive. Can you tell? I mean, it's bloody obvious. I don't recall. It's just ridiculous. Why can't he be honest? Because the more honest he is here, the closer his connection to the Alberts, the murder house, Brian Albert, the Boston cop, 6'2", 220 pounds, fit, good looking. I think Jen had a crush on him. He's on the front lawn of the Alberts house. This guy, along with Bad Sergeant Good, turns up. And now he's pretending he doesn't really know them. He's fought for them physically 20 years ago, drunk, off duty. Now he's about to turn up, drunk, was off duty. He'll tell us, no doubt, that he didn't know 34 Fairview was Brian Albert's house. Perhaps Sergeant Good didn't tell him. Perhaps Sergeant Good wrote down 32 Fairview on purpose. The Alberts house became off limits for the investigation. Let's carry on.
Aware that there was a complaint sought against you for the physical attack that was alleged to have occurred, correct?
It was brought to my attention that they had come down to the police station.
And you also are aware that only after that complaint had been sought, the police reports were then dated and filed against the two brothers, correct?
So I had spoken to the sergeant on duty the night of the
Yes or
incident.
no question. I'm just looking at the time.
It's not a yes or no question.
So he was just asking you about dates. So can you answer the question? Ask the question
Could you
about the
repeat?
dates again, please.
I'm seeking the chronology of events. The fight occurs, a complaint against you occurs, and then police reports are filed against the two people that are complaining against you. Is that the chronology?
Yes.
I think he was only drunk the first time he went to the Alberts, 20 odd years ago, with the fight. Off duty, in his car, drinking, protects the Albert physically with the fight, hides all the police reports, everything swept under the carpet. 20 odd years later, he's off duty, but I don't think he's drunk. So if I do excuse me about the confusion, I think it was only drinking in one of the incidents protecting the Alberts. Let's carry on.
And you're also aware that although he had been in a physical fight that night, no charges were ever brought against Chris Albert, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you know that?
Oh dear.
Fairview on or off?
Excuse me. I went wrong. Where are we?
That's the Albert House.
I don't recall if I realized it then or once I turned onto
No,
the street.
back a bit further.
What made you decide, or could you have decided, to take this particular call? Was it up to you, in other words?
I would never not take that call.
Okay, fair enough. So once you got the call, you knew that you were going to respond because there was something very serious afoot.
Correct.
Did you know at the time you got?
Okay, I didn't quite rewind, or I was going to say reverse. Oh, Karen reversed, didn't she? I didn't quite rewind far enough. However, it's close. Jackson then moved on from having established that Lank has already been drunk and physically fought to help an Albert, knows them, and has tried to minimize how much he knows them. We then move on to the night where John O'Keefe is found dead on Brian Albert's lawn. Let's carry on.
The call that very serious incident was occurring at 34 Fairview.
No.
When did you realize that?
Upon speaking with Sergeant Good.
Okay, so Sergeant Good didn't, I guess that's what maybe I asked an inartful question. I was asking whether or not Sergeant Good told you before you actually arrived, he sort of had to have, that it's at 34 Fairview.
He did.
Okay. At that point, did a light bulb go off and you think to yourself, ding, that's the Albert House?
I don't recall if I realized it then or once I turned onto the street. I don't recall.
At some point before your car came to a stop, you knew this is 34 Fairview, this is the Albert household.
What do you think Sergeant Good told him? But he's telling us he's ambling over to 34 Fairview without a clue in the world as to whose house it was. But then when he turned onto the road, then he realized. Then he put two and two together. That's what he wants you to believe.
I knew that was Brian Albert's house, yes.
Only when you got to the road.
When you arrived, who was the ranking officer at the scene? You mentioned, obviously we've heard these names, Sergeant Good, Officer Mullaney, Officer Seraph, you. Who was the ranking officer?
When I arrived, Sergeant Good was the ranking officer.
Have you reviewed either, well, let me ask a different question. Did you have a dash cam in the vehicle that you arrived in?
I did not.
And that's because it was that a detective vehicle?
Yes.
Sometimes used undercover, etc.?
Yes.
So it's not a fully marked cruiser.
No, not at all.
The other cruisers you're aware did have dash cams, correct?
Yes.
Have you reviewed any or all of those dash cams from Officer Mullaney, Officer Seraph, Sergeant Good?
Yes.
And you reviewed those in preparation for your testimony?
Yes.
I'd like to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 16. And I'm going to ask Mr. Bates if you could fast forward that to about the runtime of about, 28:35 or so, with the court's permission.
Yes.
Before we play this, it appears to be a still image of...
So let's not describe it.
Sure. What do you see on the screen?
I see two still images.
Okay. Do you recognize either or both of those images?
Yes.
I love the way that beautiful Aunty Bev coaches Alan Jackson.
How do you recognize them?
It looks like the scene from that morning. From I believe it's going to be the top one anyway is that 683 Officer Sarif's cruiser.
And the bottom one?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Looks like possibly Sergeant Goods based on where it's placed.
Okay. You indicated that you have reviewed these videos in anticipation of your testimony today, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to direct your attention to the top video, and specifically to an area right around this area in the video, which is highlighted. Before we play, a couple of foundational questions. Did you meet with Jennifer McCabe out behind the vehicle that's depicted in the Officer Serif dash cam?
Yes.
Did you have some sort of a conversation with her?
I did.
At some point, did you see Ms. McCabe leave your presence and walk toward the driveway?
Once the conversation had terminated, I honestly don't recall where she went.
Did she tell you that she intended to go inside the house?
I had said to her that at some point we're going to need to speak to Brian and Nicole.
Why did you think it was important to speak to Brian and Nicole?
Because it's their property.
And somebody was laying in the snow, unconscious and unresponsive, correct?
Correct.
And obviously that could potentially, at least, implicate people inside the house.
Based on my conversation with Ms. McCabe, she had stated that the intention was for Mr. O'Keefe to join them at that house, so I wanted to get statements from everybody who was there.
Find out what happened, correct?
Correct.
I mean, that's sort of the obvious initial point of an investigation. Find out who the witnesses are and interview all of them, correct?
Okay, let's now carry on with the actual analysis itself. So we've got Michael Lank. He's been drinking alcohol. He goes and has the fight. He goes to protect an Albert brother. And then what happens? Kevin Albert, who is a detective on our department, Chris Albert, and I know Tim Albert. Lank is asked about his relationships with the Albert family, but watch what his brain refuses to produce. Kevin is introduced only by job title, a detective on our department. Not my colleague Kevin, not Kevin, who I work with. The relationship to Lank is never stated. It's very subtle. Kevin Albert, who is a detective on our department, do you see, is ever so slight distancing. Chris is just a name. So in forensic linguistics, what we do is we identify patterns. So although this looks completely innocent and would go over most of our heads, we slow down and we look what it includes. Does that make any sense? And just because we notice things and we put in flags or notes on the side of the paper, and if we were marking up in a document, just because we notice things, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just that we notice that Chris Albert has no real social introduction at all in comparison to Kevin. And then we have a cognitive overload on Tim Albert, but only slight. So Chris is actually the childhood friend of Lank, since he's known He's known since the age of 12. But Chris is reduced to no introduction and just a singular name. So are we seeing sensitivity, minimizing of the relationship? And then the stutter appears, this I pattern, and the brain can't smoothly take ownership of knowing Tim, having struggled and minimized with Kevin and Chris. Can you see how even one sentence begins to give us a baseline clue as to what might follow? How long have you known Tim Albert? Jackson says. I knew. So notice the tense here. He goes to the past tense as if he no longer knows Tim. His brain is attempting extreme distance. I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid. He's not quite answering the question. How long have you known Tim Albert is the question. So in deception patterns, one of those patterns is they don't answer the question, they answer another question which they prefer. It's very subtle, but can you see that there's a difference? How long have you known Tim Albert? About 20 years. How long have you known Tim Albert? I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid because, and then I have to give a reason why. I'm not comfortable with answering this question. I begin to give my narrative. I begin to convince you. I'm not conveying and answering economically the question. 20 years. How long have you known Tim Albert? 20 years. How long have you known Tim Albert? I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid because he was friends with a younger brother of a friend of mine. Can you see? I bet you can, those who have been following the VEROSCOPE channel. This is a pattern which we learn to recognize. And it's a very similar pattern of strange linguistics, which will often follow not answering the question. It sounds slightly strange. Without knowing anything about statement analysis, you might hear this and realize that he hasn't really answered the question at all. He's avoiding being completely open and honest. And you would have picked up at your unconscious level that he was justifying, and out of the hundreds of thousands of little white lies that you've been told in your lifetime, your brain can spot, it knows, it's got a gut feeling that more times than you're happy with, when they started using this because he was friends with a younger brother of a friend of mine, I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid. You just asked how long have you known him? And so your gut feeling might be triggered to, you just might not 100% trust him. He's avoiding, he's hedging, he's being deceptive slightly. He won't just say, yes, I know them well since I was a kid. Because if you're completely innocent and you've done nothing wrong, the truth is on your side. But when you know deep down you haven't done a proper investigation, and in fact you looked the other way deliberately, because you know, when you know in your heart of hearts you didn't investigate properly. This is the only case in the history of the world where a cop has been killed on the front lawn of a house party and they didn't investigate anyone in the house properly, individually, separated them, took them down to the station, video recorded them, sent in forensic units, went down into the basement, went upstairs. Where's the dog? proper I was going to say forensic linguistics, proper forensic detail examination of the environment. Nothing. The house was effectively shut down because it's Brian Albert. This guy has physically fought for the Alberts, drunk, and went on duty. He was off duty in the car. Here he was off duty too, but turns up for the Alberts, having spoken to Good. Bad Sergeant Good. So, unfortunately, in my eyes, he has joined Bad Sergeant Good as Bad Lieutenant. I understand that certain people have been choosing which actors and are going to play them. Sandra Bullock, I believe, was mentioned by one individual, but I did watch that Lifetime movie and it didn't look like Sandra Bullock to me. So Jackson asks, how long? A simple duration question. Lank effectively answers why, and with a because. Now, Peter Hyatt, do go and check out Peter Hyatt if you don't know Peter Hyatt. He brought forensic linguistics and statement analysis to the US, in effect, along with a Secret Service agent called Mark McClish and others. But Peter Hyatt is very well recognized. Unfortunately, Peter passed away last year. But the unprompted because, this is highest priority sensitivity marker. He needs to tell me why is greater than my need to know. Lank cannot simply answer the simple question, 20 years. He feels compelled to explain the relationship through multiple intermediaries, a younger brother of a friend of mine, that old chestnut. The connection to Tim Albert must be justified, distanced, and diluted. And there's also evidence of coaching within the testimony. We have consciousness of guilt because there's no need to justify, distance, and dilute unless you are feeling, even to give Lank credit at the unconscious level, an element of guilt and shame. This wasn't the sort of investigation that John O'Keefe deserved. This is the sort of investigation that a childhood friend who needs his back covered deserves. You know, they say a good friend will help you move house, but a very good friend will help you move bodies. How much of a good friend has Lank been by not looking? And they did move house in the end, didn't they? So we have a spike of cognitive overload. His baseline begins, and he's fairly good, although he's using other techniques to be deceptive. But it hots up. It's a pattern that you see under cross-examination where the individual is not comfortable. So the triple self-interruption. Lank says, I was friendly with Chris from junior high through high school and into our 20s. And Jackson says, and friendly with Tim? I wouldn't say it was friendly. To say hello to Tim became confusing with the transcript. I may have made a transcript error here. I do apologize. but we see the pattern anyway. And in fact, in nearly every single VEROSCOPE report, because we do one a day, there are errors. But it's more the lesson as opposed to every single word has to be correct, because this is only demonstration level forensic linguistics. In fact, if you're interested in how we do word by word, go and look at one of the VEROSCOPes on Higgins, and also the VEROSCOPE report on Cannone herself, where we analyze just 20 of her words at forensic linguistic detail. And that will show you the sort of intelligence that can be achieved through a sentence versus the skimming surface level intelligence that we're gathering by going very quickly over the at communication level rather than word by word sentence level. I hope that makes sense. Some people really enjoy the single sentence analysis because of the depth of intelligence that can be gleaned, and it's quite incredible that a single sentence shows us so much about what was likely to be happening in the unconscious as the broker, the area of the brain responsible for choosing the words, chose. And so that's what we're really doing. We're establishing linguistic empathy with the speaker. We're getting inside their heads. We're, in effect, trying to think like them temporarily. You've all seen Mindhunter and the other programs on the subject, and catching serial killers. And so getting this linguistic empathy where you enter for a short while their thinking through, in effect, extreme rapport or linguistic empathy, you begin to understand why they're choosing these words, what thoughts are happening inside their heads. And so much can be revealed, even at the single sentence level. Do subscribe if you haven't already to VEROSCOPE, because YouTube will no doubt send you one or two VEROSCOPE videos over the next few months, and you might enjoy them. So do subscribe if you haven't. Then we have a little bit of feigned confusion from Lank. Jackson asks, certainly with regard to Chris, you would consider him a close friend. And Lank says, consider who a close friend? Chris. I'm using first names only because they're all Alberts. Sure. Chris and I, pretty good friends when we were younger, yes. So it becomes distant and minimized again. Pretty good. Pretty good is if somebody you know quite well and you're pretty good friends with. How would you feel? A close friend of yours, if they said, yeah, I know Sandra. She's a pretty good friend. I don't know, is that good? She's a pretty, or is it derogatory? Doesn't it tell you not really? Sort of good, but it needs qualifying. What do you think? Anyway, the point is there's constant distancing away from the Alberts. So psychologically, as we enter through that linguistic empathy, as we enter Lank's mind, it's dangerous to be connected too closely to the Alberts, because then the jury might think, what everyone else thinks, that it's biased, and you cannot have the lead detective of a murder investigation of a Boston cop knowing and friends with the suspects. Of course they're not going to do an investigation. It's ridiculous. As I said before, it's the only time in the history of the world, in the history of policing, where the party house, where a cop is murdered, is completely ignored for evidence, and a line is drawn in the snow to just the verge of the road. We can look there, perhaps a little bit of the lawn, but no further, because otherwise we might discover the truth. It's deliberate ostriching at an extreme level. No one outside of this crew can believe that you can have a killed cop and they don't even go in the house. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to know that's fishy. So let's carry on. When we were younger, it even needed this. So we got minimization followed by when we were younger. It's distancing because he's got that consciousness of guilt, shame. Perhaps not consciously shame, but deep down he knows. And this is why we're seeing this pattern. And we saw tense changes, didn't we? Which we highlighted and flagged. We didn't see this sort of pattern. It's being pushed into history. The present connection must be severed linguistically inside his mind. Can you see, by getting this linguistic empathy, what's happening? He's deliberately shutting down the relationship in case you see the truth. And if you see the truth, you're going to put two and two together. This is why he's doing it. So let's have a look at the 2002 incident. And Chris Albert told you some information about being in a fight. Lank says, he told me he had been in an altercation earlier in the night and some threats had been made to him and his family. So he escalates up. If threats have been made to him, put it this way, and you know where I'm going with this. If this occurs, it doesn't end up with a chipped tooth and a black eye. There are far more consequences to this. So I believe this is escalating and justifying. Or there's not really being done, or it's minimal. But he felt the need to add this unnecessarily. Huge amounts of justification and unnecessary language to a simple question. Sometimes, as a baseline, Lank will use to his strategic advantage a singular no. Other times he feels that he has to give us all the unnecessary information as justification. So, the defensive formula appears from Lank. This is the first appearance of what will become Lank's scripted response. Remember it. It returns verbatim at line 103. As we go on, we're going to be doing a multi-part on Lank. It's 3 parts, so this is part 1. But later on, we're going to be seeing his linguistics really hot up. So do hang around, do subscribe for those next coming analysis as we complete his VEROSCOPE report. Threats had been made, passive voice. Do you see, in many of the VEROSCOPE videos, passive voice comes up time and time again. Threats had been made. The gun went off. The car seat was moved. The lights were turned off. And we'll cover lights and bathrooms on another VEROSCOPE report. Passive voice. So we've got the likely reaction, if it was absolutely true, coupled with linguistic evidence that it's being minimized to a degree, and the threats had been made, so he wasn't confident to really put it out there for us to consider. Does that make sense? This is not asked, it's volunteered, it expands the victim's scope, makes the threat sound more serious, and it really justifies. Don't forget, we've got Lank, bad lieutenant, in his car, drinking. I can picture the scene with his, I don't think it'd be as uncouth enough to have cans of beer on the front seat, but you know, he feels like he's going to get away with it. Perhaps he's got that half a bottle in his coat pocket, who knows? And he gets out of his car, stinking of alcohol, no doubt. Gets into a fight with the 6 lads. Fair enough, he protected his mate, the Albert, and he does it again 20 years later. Or 20 odd years later, whatever it is. 22, is it? Jackson says, did you come to Chris's aid by quote unquote activating yourself as an officer? Lank says, I got out of my car and I approached the group and I pleaded with them not to fight tonight. Sorry, to not fight tonight. I said, there's not going to be a fight tonight. There's 6 of you guys. He's here with his girlfriend. There's not going to be a fight tonight. So fight tonight, fight tonight, fight tonight. I think we can say that fight tonight is sensitive to Lank. Isn't it? 3 fight tonights. There's not going to be a fight tonight. Well, I think we can say that the language was slightly different than the story he's telling us. However, we get the gist. We see strong pronoun. I got out, I approached, I pleaded. 3 first-person statements in sequence. So he's comfortable to be in the statement. This did occur. He's comfortable owning the heroic narrative too. He's more than happy, although it doesn't serve his purpose, and that's why he has to minimize, but he's happy to take the heroic part and put himself psychologically firmly into the truth. The irony. A fight did break out. Lank did engage. He was on top of a man on the ground. His repeated insistence that there would be no fight reveals his awareness that one was imminent. Fight tonight. Fight tonight. Fight tonight. Very sensitive to him. There's not going to be a fight tonight. He's here with his girlfriend. Again, this is not asked, it's extra information. He's effectively, in the short amount of time that he has for the jury, he plants sympathy and more heroism for himself. That wasn't asked. Jackson says, did you come to Chris Albert's aid as best you could as a long-time friend of his? Look at this extreme minimization. Extreme shame and guilt from Lank. his unconscious mind, or coaching, perhaps conspiring with others how to deal with the facts of the case that he knows the Alberts extremely well since childhood and is friends with them and has helped them before physically in a fight. This is what happens. He says, I came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and in need. This is bullshit. You were drunk in a car off duty and got in a fight with your mate, and then other policemen backed you up because it was 6 against 2, and then the policeman had to drag you off the guy. But if you want to tell us that you came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and in need, then you go right ahead, Lank. This is minimization and deceptive. And it's not necessary. Lank isn't involved in the murder. He doesn't need to protect these people. And things have happened. Communications have gone on. Jen has spoken to him when he arrives, I believe. And I understand that Jen has ended up in his house. At some point in time, bad Lieutenant Lank, in my opinion, is going to be talking with the FBI. And at that moment, he has the ability to be Detective Sergeant Lieutenant Lank and not a childhood friend of a suspect. So, childhood friend since the age of 12 turns into a citizen on the witness stand. We note articles in forensic linguistics. The article A is used for unknown persons. Chris Albert is not unknown. Very quickly, and you'll have heard me say this before, but repetition is good for learning. A man stuck a gun in my back. The man placed the gun in my back. A robbery victim. Which of those statements, the robbery victim is an inside man? Well, the man stuck the gun in my back, not a man stuck a gun in my back. The and a or a, different articles. The gun rather than a gun or a gun. The gun lends itself to having been seen before. Does that make sense? Whereas a gun, a random one, lends itself that you haven't seen it before. So there's the gun versus a gun. And there's the man versus a man. And there's the gun. The man stuck the gun in my back. A man stuck a gun in my back. Do you see? It's very subtle. But the inside man is the man that said, the man stuck the gun in my back, because he'd seen the man before and had seen the gun before. And the innocent victim said, a man stuck a gun in my back. Articles, along with pronouns, are very reliable. But look, when we go inside Lank's mind, when we go inside his thinking, we get that rapport. We get the linguistic empathy. We see he wants to distance from the Alberts. I can't be too close to these people, or you'll think I deliberately didn't investigate. and we have his childhood friend turns into a citizen, not even the citizen, just a citizen, a random one that he doesn't know and he hasn't seen before at the unconscious level. He can't say the truth of the citizen, which would be truthful because he knows the citizen, because it would be ridiculous. So he has to use the article a for the ridiculousness to at least be acceptable to him, although it's ridiculous to everyone else. So we look out for articles. The core deception, the bias made visible. This is the moment Jackson asked directly, did you help Chris as a long-time friend? Lank's brain faces an impossible choice here. If he says yes, he confirms the bias the jury is evaluating. If he says no, I wasn't helping my friend, it's an obvious lie. He's stuck. So the brain produces a third option. It creates an identifiable pattern that when they're stuck, they will often choose. Look how stupid it sounds. A citizen who is in fear and in need. We know that you're drunk in the car chatting to your mate, and you're about to get in a fight with these 6 other drunk lads. But you want to tell us, actually, it was a citizen who was in fear and in need. It's ridiculous. It's an article violation to boot. The indefinite article A is used for unknown persons being introduced. A man walked in. I saw a woman. Chris Albert is not a citizen. He is a specific, known, lifelong friend. This is pathetic. Lank has known him for over 20 years. By converting Chris to a citizen, the brain transforms personal loyalty into civic duty. This is how, at the unconscious level, Lank doesn't feel the extreme guilt and shame which he does at a deeper level. He's trying to convince himself. And in fact, you'll notice that in therapeutic environments, it's self-deception that is often the problem. And in fact, forensic linguistics and statement analysis, once you have mastered the skill to the degree where at conversational speed, you can begin to pick up extra intelligence. As a therapist, your ability to help somebody identify their own self-deceptions increases. So learning this skill has therapeutic applications, whether that's even for yourself to understand better what's happened in the past and connect your gut feel with the words, perhaps, in your emails or your WhatsApps. This is what bias looks like in language. The citizen is the tell. A game of show and tell. You're showing us everything, but you're telling us nothing. So, I came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and in need. We have I, strong opener, takes credit for the action. To the aid of, this is a distancing phrase. Helped would be more direct. To the aid of, isn't this heroic? Put your cape on, Lank. Citizen, depersonalization, converts lifelong friend to an anonymous stranger who's in need of the man in a cape. He had to come to the aid of a citizen. In fear. Heroic framing. Chris is the helpless victim requiring a rescue, not your drunk mate you're about to take 6 guys on with. Active verb. I came to the aid. He's comfortable with the action itself. Really what happened was he stumbled out of the car. A citizen, article violation, indefinite article for a known specific person. Who was? He begins the heroic justification and creates the victim narrative. Who was in fear and in need. And he turns up, stumbling around in the mud and the blood and the guts. Had to be dragged off the guy. 13 words, 5 deceptive constructions. We've done far more detailed single sentence analysis, but this gives you some of the flavour of it. We then have some acceptance. That citizen happened to be Chris Albert, whom you had known since you were 12 years old, correct? Correct. Jackson uses happened to be sarcastically. It's coincidence language for what was clearly not coincidence. A truthful person would push back. He didn't happen to be. He's my friend and I helped him. That's why I was there. There's no reason, and in fact, to all people who are about to go on the witness stand or will be in the future, don't lie. You don't need to lie. The truth stands on its own 2 feet. And don't be afraid of the truth. You don't need to lie. You don't need to be deceptive. Let the truth arrive. Don't need to hide your shame and guilt through your language. He accepts the framing. His brain prefers the lie of the sarcasm and the randomness over the truth. The friendship happened to be, as if it were cosmic coincidence that he was helping Chris Albert, rather than deliberate response to a friend's call, which, let's be fair, is a good thing to do, but not on murder night, Lank. Not on murder night. Drunk, in a fight with a black eye and a chipped tooth, no problem. Help your mate. But not on murder night. The pivot. Jackson says, just like you were off duty in 2022 when you were called by bad Sergeant Good. It was a real coincidence when we did the VEROSCOPE report and Sergeant Good was then released from duty days later. And it was said that it was because of a third-party report. And I got a couple of emails saying it's issue, but it wasn't at all. I believe it was a physical investigation on the ground. Lank says, when Sergeant Good contacted me, I was not working. I was due to work at 7:45 that morning when Sergeant Good contacted me and told me what was going on. Then I activated myself and came to work because I was the detective sergeant. This is the point of the entire examination. Jackson draws the explicit parallel, just like you were off duty in 2022. Protecting the Alberts with the fight physically, and now when you were off duty and drunk, and now you're off duty in 2022, and bad Sergeant Good gets you to the scene of the crime to protect your friends. Same pattern, same family, different decade. Lank's response is the longest in the entire testimony. Notice, when Sergeant Good contacted me, said twice, do you see the sensitivity? He needs to emphasize, I was contacted. We have lots of unnecessary language, unprompted, because reason-wise he's having to justify and explain himself. This is volunteered information. We note the specific time, not asked over justification. This part of his transcript is the most sensitive. The brain is in full defensive mode because Jackson's point isn't about initiation, it's about who he activated for. In 2002, off duty. 22, off duty. 02 drinking alcohol, 22 called by Good. A friend contacts him, Albert home, activates himself. Both off duty, both activated. He comes to the rescue with his cape. Da-da-da. Never fear, Lank's here. Chris is protected. Nothing is documented. Everything's swept under the carpet. He controls the outcome in 2022. He runs the investigation. The Alberts are protected. Jen McCabe is already in his ear the moment he arrives. Yabba, 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 in her Jen McCabe way. Influencing, setting the scene, explaining what needs to happen. Gaslighting. She's the master manipulator, she thinks. Although when we slow down and look at her language, we see right through her. Jackson says, he was the one that you were activating yourself to protect, right? Correct. The single word that says everything. Jackson forces it into the open. I think Lank made an error here. He just answered it instead of his usual pattern of avoidance and hedging. In a single word, Lank admits he activated himself to protect Chris Albert, his longtime friend. The bias is confirmed, and all he can offer is a bare correct. No elaboration, no defense, no spin. The word stands alone because there is nowhere left to hide. What happens when he activates himself again 20 years later for another Albert? He was the one that you were activating yourself to protect, right? Correct. The bias in the past has been admitted. And this man, who has been biased in the past to protect an Albert, who has physically fought for an Albert, is now the detective sergeant in charge of the 2022 investigation at 34 Fairview Road, where John O'Keefe has been found dead on the front lawn, where the party was. Now, what do you need to do to protect your friend? Number one, don't go in the house. Don't let anyone else in the house. Don't collect any evidence in the house. And become the only murder investigation in the entire history of the world where you have a murdered cop on the front lawn of a property and there is no investigation into the property. It's just, I mean, it's unbelievable. It will probably never happen again because it's never happened before. This is the only time in the history of investigations it's happened. I mean, what does that tell you? There isn't a single policeman in the world that wouldn't raise their eyes when told of this. What do all the Boston cops think? It's their fellow officer who's dead, and you've got a Canton, let's be fair, inexperienced detective sergeant in charge who knows them. Now, to be also fair to Lank, he eventually recuses himself. But after Proctor has established what's going to happen, everybody's safe, everybody's protected. Pin it on the girl, as Jackson said. So, we have a pattern here, don't we? And then later, we have the 7-stutter collapse. He, I, don't know what he was doing. I was busy with the group that was there. This was the highest point of sensitivity in the first third of the trial transcript. It peaked right here. We always like to look for these I didn't have patterns. They are almost always deceptive. It was friendly. We have cognitive overload coupled with mixtures of self-censorship, not being able to settle on what he's going to say. It's all happening extremely quickly at the unconscious level as the broker is struggling to choose deceptive words because it knows the truth, so it's got so much more to manage, and it creates this pattern. Jackson says, even though he was the one that initiated the contact with you to tell you that he had been in a fight earlier, right? He told me that, he told me, sensitivity, that he had been in an altercation and that threats had been made to him and his family. Before, he says, he told me he had been in an altercation earlier in the night and some threats had been made to him and his family. He told me that, he told me that he had been in an altercation and that threats had been made to him and his family. Nearly word for word, isn't it? Not quite, but nearly. But we have the same passivity in the same area of the threats and the altercation. Him and his family are the same. When pressed under stress, the brain returns to the safe, rehearsed script. This is not pure recall. He is reciting. It's a prepared formula. It's not genuine memory. Note the restart. He told me that, he told me that. Isn't that an unusual pattern? The brain needs to reset before delivering the script that it knows word for word. Linguistic empathy. Very similar. So we have evidence of preparation possibly coaching. He's reciting from a prepared script. He is still supporting his friends. Jackson said, "You never documented that Chris Albert had been in a fight earlier that night." Lank says, "He told me he was in an altercation. I didn't have the details." This is the second triple I stutter. But here's the interesting observation of when the triple I, in other words, the extreme cognitive overload, when it occurs. Both triple stutters occur when protecting Chris Albert from documentation or accountability. Isn't that interesting? The pattern is diagnostic. The brain produces identical stress response when navigating the same cognitive territory. How to protect Chris while appearing professional. So Lank is the controller, calls for backup, officers handcuff one of the guys, another guy has got Lank on top of him. If this guy had managed to give Lank a few belts, no doubt Lank, having achieved the mountains now, making him pay. I'm sure he got one last in as he was dragged off. Chris Albert, never touched, never charged. And of course, there's other evidence, isn't there, of other people protecting others who have been involved in killings themselves and received similar Canton protection. Is that right? Do put in the comments what we know about that for those that have extremely good case knowledge. So, the patterns converge. We don't have good, reliable denials. There were plenty of opportunities to give solid denials. We had singular words, didn't we, like no. We have a citizen for a lifelong friend. We've got the cognitive overload and the stuttering instances. It's interesting where they appear in the triple I, both protecting Chris. We have 7 stutter response on Chris's role, 3 incomplete introductions, all for the Alberts. We have scripted repetition. We have progressive distancing in the relationship language. We have past tense shifts for present relationships and feigned confusion to buy processing time. The bias cannot be denied because denial would be a lie. He's stuck and comes up with the ridiculous citizen words. What Lieutenant Lank never said, a person without bias would simply deny it. These denials were never issued. I did not use my position to help the Alberts. My friendship had no effect on my actions. I did not strike the guy on the ground that you were on top of. I did not favour Chris Albert. I would have done the same for anyone. My relationship did not influence my investigation. He could not give any reliable denial. Instead, the best we get is a citizen who is in need and in fear. It's a deflection. And so, yeah, in effect, the pattern, the deflection, is the confession of Lank's bias. Even if it's at the unconscious level, because his guilt and shame is at the unconscious level, he won't have dealt with it. He's still in denial. I wonder if Lank will cooperate with the FBI. Perhaps he already is. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of today's Veroscope. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you got some value from it. If you did, please do subscribe if you haven't already. Please do like, comment, feel free to share. You're more than welcome to use clips or link the entire video, and I look forward to chat with you in the comments.